Uber and Lyft are the two biggest companies in the ride-sharing business. Off the top of my head, I really can't even think of any other names, especially in the US. So that is why we are going to focus this video on Uber and Lyft and how each of them are battling for the future of transportation. In this video, we're going to look at how each got started, what each is doing differently to try and compete, and what they are planning to do in the future.
For the 718th time, we present Camaro versus Mustang.
Many of us rely on them to get around, and I always wonder, you probably do too, which one is better?
It's just one offensive in its battle with rival Pepsi for hearts and taste buds.
Before we dive into it, don't forget to like and subscribe. Uber was started back in 2009 by Travis Kalanick and Garrett Camp. Before Uber, both of them found and sold their previous companies. Garrett Camp founded StumbleUpon, which was sold to eBay in 2017 for $75 million. Travis Kalanick founded Red Swoosh, which was sold for $15 million, also in 2017. So these two had success even before Uber. One year though, they were at a tech conference and had trouble finding a cab. This is when they thought of the Uber idea of just hailing a cab from your phone with the push of a button. Soon after, an app was developed called Uber Cab. They began running some trials, and in May of 2010, launched the service to the public, but only in the San Francisco area. Uber's cabs at the time cost 50% more than a traditional cab. The selling point that it was more convenient to use an app to hail a cab, and the cars were nicer black cabs. So they appealed to wealthier business people that had to get places quickly and didn't mind spending the little extra for the convenience. Later that year, San Francisco Metro Transit Authority was not happy about what they were doing and ordered them to stop. They reached a deal, however, and changed their name to just Uber, so they wouldn't be labeled as a cab company, but rather a technology company. After the success in San Francisco, they quickly expanded to other major cities. Today, they're all over the country and even started to expand internationally. With such aggressive expansion, they needed a lot of funding. In 2011, they had their Series A funding round. They secured $11 million, which valued the company at $50 million. Just 2 years later, they had a Series C funding round. Uber secured $363 million, and the company was valued at $3.5 billion. In 2019, they became a publicly traded company and aimed for a valuation over $100 billion. This did not happen though, and they became public at $45 a share with a valuation of $82 billion. Now let's jump into the story of how Lyft got started. Back in 2012, Lyft was started by John Zimmer and Logan Green. The first version of Lyft was called Zimride. You would think that it was named after John Zimmer, and you would think that he had a big ego to name the company after himself. But actually, Logan Green came up with that name even before he ever met John Zimmer. Apparently, the Zim in Zimride was named after Zimbabwe. Logan Green recently visited and was fascinated by the commonality of people sharing rides. The name is actually what brought the two together. They had a mutual friend on Facebook, and John Zimmer saw a post about Zimride and was immediately intrigued and reached out to Logan Green. They soon started to work together. Zimride's initial focus was on college campuses and was a kind of social media network geared more towards sharing longer rides from cities to cities. Zimride was pretty successful, but after seeing the success of Uber, they decided in 2012 to focus on ride sharing for short distances like Uber was doing. In May of 2012, they created the Lyft app. They decided to focus on Lyft, and in 2013, the Zimride service was sold to Enterprise and is still actually being used today. At the time, Uber's main client base was wealthy people, since it was more expensive than a traditional taxi. Lyft saw an opportunity to do the same thing, but for everyday people. Soon after Lyft started, Uber launched UberX, which was a cheaper alternative to their black car service. This is where the true rivalry between the two starts, because they were now directly competing in each other's markets. Lyft has always been the underdog compared to Uber, but recently Lyft has been slowly chipping away at their market share. In 2017, Lyft had around a 10% market share, and Uber had basically 90%. But now, in 2019, Lyft states that they almost have 40% market share. This also shows how these two companies dominate the US ride-sharing market, so much so that taking an Uber just means using a ride-sharing service. In 2019, Lyft actually beat Uber by going public first. Their initial public offering price was $72 a share, which valued the company at $24.3 billion. Lyft has been aggressive in its marketing and has been constantly giving out free rides to new users. In 2016, they spent more money on sales and marketing than they did on anything else. Their marketing expenses were actually higher than their total revenue for 2016. They also have been trying to undercut Uber on pricing and have more incentives for drivers. Uber also takes the brunt of the bad publicity when it comes to ride sharing, since it has the bigger market share. Some of the bad publicity Uber has seen is sexual harassment claims, dangerous drivers, and people intentionally pretending to be an Uber to lure people into their cars. Uber was also hit with a $20 million lawsuit because they were misleading their drivers on how much they can earn. All of this led to their CEO, who is another controversial figure, to step down in 2017. Lyft, on the other hand, has a much cleaner image, and they pride themselves on friendliness. Even in their marketing, they use a lot brighter colors. Their logo is also pink, which gives off a much friendlier feel than Uber's black logo. However, all this bad publicity didn't stop Uber from growing. In 2019, their revenue was $11.3 billion, compared to Lyft, which had revenues of only $2.2 billion. Lyft is a lot smaller of a company compared to Uber. A thing to note though is that Lyft's revenue is actually growing faster than Uber's, as they continue to take market share in the US. Lyft also only operates in the US and parts of Canada, where Uber operates in 80 countries worldwide. As the ride-sharing market keeps growing, both of these companies are starting to look for new ways to innovate. Lyft has jumped into the scooter craze and has begun distributing public scooters in major cities across the US. You can now use the Lyft app to locate the nearest scooter and simply scan the scooter to unlock it. When you're done, you simply hop off and leave the scooter there for the next person. Many cities, though, have issues with these scooters littering the streets as people drop them off in the middle of the sidewalks. The outcry to get rid of them has been so much that Lyft and other scooter companies have been slowly getting rid of them. Uber's main focus for the future is on driverless technology. They want you to be able to call an Uber and have a driverless car come and pick you up. They mostly want to do this so they can eliminate the drivers, as people have been unhappy working for them. All Uber drivers are independent contractors and aren't actually hired directly by Uber. Uber does this so they don't have to have as much liability in case something happens. Uber and Lyft have been heavily criticized for this tactic, as their drivers often make less than minimum wage and don't have health insurance through their employer, since they are independent contractors. Uber has also been criticized by how they are testing their driverless vehicles. They released self-driving cabs without a permit, and the cars started to run red lights and drive dangerously throughout the city. Also in 2019, one of their self-driving cars hit and killed a jaywalker that the system didn't recognize. Both Lyft and Uber will continue to dominate the US ride-sharing market, since they are the only companies in the US having ride-sharing at this scale. In the future, we might see another company emerge, but I think they would have to be bringing something new, such as self-driving cars, and beat them to the punch. And with that being said, as always, thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe to see more.